since you mentioned the boats, what do we understand about the technology that we're using? Can you just speak a little bit more to this 1 inch of oak idea? So these were these long ships that were also able to travel on rivers. So they're not like what is structurally do we know about the boats that allow them to be so flexible in terms of where they can travel?
Yeah, I mean, and this was the Vikings' great secret, and I think it's underappreciated. They built different types of ships, obviously, for different purposes, but the thing that blows my mind is that they built these ships that could cross an ocean, cross the Atlantic Ocean, and at the same time, when they had a draft of less than 2 feet, so they could sail up rivers that were 2 feet deep, and if they came to a block or something, 20 men could pick up the ship and port it around. So they were incredibly portable, and their speed. The speed was the most frightening thing about the Vikings.
So these are the same kind of ship that they sailed the ocean on.
Yeah, I mean it's insane.
So they're pretty sufficiently robust to handle the ocean and sufficiently mobile to travel on rivers and do so really fast. So
Yeah,
you mentioned speed. That seems to be, from a military perspective, the great advantage
that's
of the
right.
Vikings because they can move much faster than the land armies can. So in not just the element of surprise, which they often had, but the element of speed was the thing that gave them an extreme advantage against the British armies.
That was the big one. So an English army, if it had access to a good Roman road that was well maintained, which frankly there weren't tons of them, but they could average something like 10 to 15 miles per day
Mhm.
on a good day if they didn't have a large baggage train to slow them down. If you had a cavalry unit that didn't have to travel with the army, they could average about 20 miles a day. The Viking longships could average 70 to 120 miles a day. So they're just moving in super fast motion. They could hit a place, raid it, drag off whoever they wanted, and get away before you could get your army there. It's just absolutely terrifying.
What do you think it felt like for Alcuin and the monks to see the Viking ships on the horizon? Do you ever think about try to put yourself in the mind of those folks and imagining in that time you don't have a full map of the world, right? And the oceans are not mapped, and you have a hazy conception of the world. And so out of the darkness from the ocean where you thought nothing can come comes this terrifying, this brutal force. What do you think that felt like?
Honestly, I think it's the end of the world, and and I don't think they were wrong to think that. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says the night before Lindisfarne, the monks saw sheets of lightning in the sky in the shape of dragons, and this is obviously meant to, foreshadow the dragon ships coming up. I can't imagine the horror. It would shake my faith, I'm sure, to have these giant men jumping out of their ships with swords raised, and what do you have? Cross.
Were the Vikings aware of the fear that they had caused? So did they use fear as a kind of weapon, or was this just a side consequence of their actions, or did they understand and use it? Like the Mongols, Genghis Khan, the Mongols used the fear and the terror on purpose to
Yeah,
increase the chance that they wouldn't have to avoid fights, basically.
yeah, yeah. The Vikings absolutely used terror. It was a main weapon in their arsenal. They would attack specifically on high holy days like Easter, Christmas, because they knew there'd be higher value targets there with richer clothing, richer offerings, and there'd be a lot of money available. So they were rather sophisticated, which I think is something also that they don't get much credit for. It's like they were just dumb brutes attacking and just destroying. But it was very sophisticated. They would show up. This is what I mean when I say Viking wasn't their day jobs. They would be traders in say an English port, kind of looking around. They'd get everyone's schedule, then they would sail away and come back as Vikings, and they knew exactly where to go. They knew where all the money was held. They knew where all the churches were, when to attack. They knew the entire Christian calendar. They knew when someone's baptism was, when someone's confirmation. I mean, they were aware of all of this, and they would definitely attack to increase terror.
one of the signs of the intelligence of the Vikings is that the Viking Age is so short. So what happens is these explorers and these rough men who do the raids, they very quickly are good at conquering and then start state building, or conquering and then establishing trade routes, and stop being the quote-unquote Vikings. So basically they conquer and then they start doing the usual build the institution, start a state, and now they're normal kind of nation civilization kind of thing. So this kind of force that is the conquering, raid, violent, intense explorers is like a short lasting thing, a couple of generations at most.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Vikings were ultimately a pragmatic people who, if it worked, they would keep it, which is frustrating because they disappear so quickly because of that.
With very little trace in
With
the
very little
record,
trace.
with
That's
that
right.
very little writing.
That's right.
There's
Yeah.
no time for writing it down.
No. Yes. We're not doing that.
Yeah. Why were monasteries such good targets for these early raids?
This is where I imagine myself as a Viking and one of my ancestors, perhaps,
Yeah.
and sailing in. I mean, they must have thought they had won the lottery.
Yeah.
You got these rich buildings, rich gold everywhere,
Mm.
these decorated books, jewels, all guarded by old men who don't know how to fight. You just take it.
I mean, we should make clear that the monasteries they were used as almost like storage for gold.
Yeah, and this goes all the way back to, the Roman Empire where, think of, for example, the Emperor Augustus. When he was writing his will, he put it in the Temple of the Vestal Virgins, as well as Mark Antony and Cleopatra. They'd all done that because there's this additional protection of religion and this taboo against violating that. And the same thing happened when Europe was Christianized. Monasteries were rich people, their faith had to be an active faith. They couldn't just say their prayers and go to church on Sunday. They would have to do something to publicly show that they were, worthy of forgiveness or whatever. And so they would donate huge sums to the church. I think, by the time of the French Revolution, which is obviously way in the future, the church is the largest single landowner in France. I mean, the monasteries were these monasteries filled with monks who had taken vows of poverty were some of the richest places in Europe. It's kind of a strange dichotomy here.
And then we should also say that the Vikings, many of them pragmatic people, so a lot of them would eventually then convert to Christianity. So
That's right.
you integrate yourself into the system.
That's right.
In some sense, religion creates this backbone of a society that stabilizes it, and then you create a bunch of rules about behavior, how you're supposed to behave. One of the rules is you don't mess with the church buildings and the religious institutions, and therefore they become great storage places for gold.
That's right.
And then the Vikings here just test the system.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the fortune of geography for them and the fortune of their way of life. To be able to raid, to become extremely rich, and therefore it both spreads the terror across England and the message across Scandinavia that there's a lot of riches to be had. And so the raids, that's why there's an explosion of raids.